If you're running finance at a small or mid-sized business right now, you're probably feeling the squeeze from all sides. More complexity, more transactions, higher expectations, and still a lot of manual work holding everything together. And at the same time, every vendor is telling you AI is the answer. But what does that actually look like in practice? And more importantly, what does real value look like when you bring AI into financial operations? Today, we're digging into that with Mike Cieri, Chief Product Officer at Bill. Mike's been at the center of Bill's push into agentic AI. We get into the core problems SMBs are trying to solve today, how the definition of automation is evolving, and how Bill is deciding where to invest as the AI wave accelerates. We also talk about what it really takes to build AI for a high-stakes domain like finance, how you train it, validate it, and measure whether it's actually working. And then there's the bigger picture. In a crowded fintech landscape, with plenty of AI fatigue setting in, what actually differentiates Bill's approach? And are finance teams ready for this agentic push? Mike dives into all this and more. Stay tuned. Hey, Mike, so let's start with the big picture. Like when you think about the financial operational challenges facing small and mid-sized businesses today, we talk a lot about that on this podcast. What is the core problem you're trying to solve at Bill?
Yeah, I mean, I think today when you look at how most finance teams work, it's still incredibly manual. There's a ton of work that's done by finance professionals that um, could be automated and could be done actually better through the use of technology. You know, when we talk to customers and accounting firms, you know, most clients and SMBs are still using like multiple pieces of financial software to run their financial stack. Some of that software is integrated, some of it's not. Some things are starting to have, you know, AI coworkers involved, some aren't. The data is not totally, you know, tied out. And what ends up happening is customers ultimately end up skipping a lot of that newer functionality because it doesn't work that well together. And they do lots of things manually. You know, when I go and look at most accounts payable clerks or customers who are paying bills, they're still examining every bill, keying in every bill, you know, paying every bill largely manually. And so saving time, I think, is like one of the biggest things that we are helping to automate with our financial operations platform. And then the second one I would say is just better financial outcomes, like helping to guide customers on better use of funds, better ways of paying bills, better ways of just managing money out and money in to get to better financial outcomes through intelligence. So those are the two things that I think we really are trying to do at Bill with our financial operations platform.
So the second one is definitely the holy grail in the space. Obviously, if you can improve financial outcomes, that's great.
Yeah.
I want to double click on the first one. So I've been saying on the podcast for a while that, you know, we are at the early stages of a renaissance really for financial software for small, medium-sized businesses. And what you're saying, it sounds to me is like there has been the creation of a lot of new software and options, I guess, for your customers. But at the end of the day, the core problems haven't necessarily been solved. They're still juggling.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I think you've got, you know, we are trying to serve the Fortune 5 million, as we say, like the long tail of SMBs. So not large enterprises, not, you know, massive companies that have their own IT shops and their own engineering teams, but you know, the everyday mom and pop shop, the small, medium-sized business that we all interact with in our daily lives. And when you're serving a group of customers of that size, there's lots of different stages that people might be in the change curve. I mean, we've got some folks who are a little bit more advanced and who are, you know, leaning in more with integrating software, a little bit more technically ahead. And then some that are really not, you know, and are really very much not comfortable trusting technology to do some of these things. And so, you know, one of the biggest things I think for Bill just to get over is the trust factor. Like, how do we help customers trust that the technology and the software will unlock these gains that we're talking about? And that does require a bit of leap of faith. You know, it's money after all. This is one of the things people are most nervous about, you know, having AI hallucinate with or something like go wrong. And so, you know, trust is something we really try to work on and ensuring the way we build software, the way we position the company, our like very heavy compliance regulations that we lean into, our security platform. Like those are all things that we do to build trust with the customers, to earn the right to help them with these kinds of jobs, which are traditionally, you know, can be a little bit scary to trust software with.
Totally get that. And you emphasized in the first question, giving time back to your clients. And I guess automation is a big part of that strategy. So you've been leading software strategy at Bill for a while now. And I'm kind of curious how your thinking has evolved on what automation means now for finance teams, and how is Bill contributing to the space for its clients?
Yeah, totally. Great question. I mean, I think that, a few years ago when AI was just starting to pick up steam, there was all these conversations about, well, hey, this is going to eliminate all these jobs and it's going to be 100% automated. And we're going to see just this revolution in white collar work. And some of that's playing out in certain areas, but more so what we've seen is, instead of this like big bang change, is just we've found success with task-based automation of things that just are repetitive, people do day in and day out, and eat up a bunch of time. And so on our end, a couple examples to point to, like, our customers spend a ton of time trying to track down W-9s at the end of the year so they can do 1099s when they get to tax season. And so we released a W-9 agent that's specifically about connecting with their suppliers, ensuring that W-9 information is collected, encoding that correctly so when it's 1099 time, they're ready to go. And that's an example of task-based automation that they do numerous times every year, and it takes hours and hours, if not days and weeks and months, to get done by somebody's time. And we've been able to like rapidly shrink that. So that's like, it's an example of like a focused area of automation, a focused piece of time savings. Another one, just to mention, is on our spend and expense product, receipt management, gathering receipts, entering receipts in, making sure that your expenses from an employee standpoint are IRS compliant. That's like, nobody likes doing that stuff. That work
No.
is fun. We all do it, and we're trying to take that down materially so that transactions are more or less touchless, in the sense that you swipe, you spend, and assuming everything, is kosher with like policy and everything like that, it just goes through. You don't really have to do anything with that. So driving down the amount of work that has to go into these menial tasks that are critical, but like add up, has been where we've seen success with automation so far.
So many of our conversations on this podcast over the past 2 years have been about AI, and obviously, being in the software industry, I'm sure that the same is true behind closed doors. I'm curious how you think about cutting through the noise, because there is a lot of noise in the space, and actually delivering value versus just having like AI features to check a box.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I think that we are in an interesting space in financial management where there's both like workflow going on, and then there's financial transactions and financial operations that are occurring within that workflow. And so the workflow side is where we see the ripest opportunity for automation. And it's some of the things I just talked about, like really limiting the amount of work that gets you to a place to be able to execute a financial transaction or execute a payment or take a loan, or something that is a financial service offering. Really like just bringing the time down on that materially, and then ensuring that the payment that you're doing, the payment method you're using, the timing of that payment, the way you might be taking capital in the form of a loan, is optimal for you based off of the information that we have about your context and your situation. And so I think that for us, it's been because our platform is a system of action, if you will. It's like where people go to do things. It's not just a end database or a storage facility, or it's actually where people are living and working every day. And you go and you look at people that use our accounts payable product, like that thing is up all day on their desk. They're just going through and paying bills. That is the kind of space that I think is ripe for meaningful acceleration through AI. And then on the financial services side and the payment side, we're still in early innings there. I think there's a lot that can come, but we're still sort of building trust and the right to automate more of the payment side. We've done some, but I think that might be, chapter 2, chapter 3, where we earn the trust to move money agentically. But so far, it's mostly been on the workflow. That's where we've been able to cut through and see, material time savings to some of the examples I just gave.
I'm curious, as you're building for the future, and we do spend a lot of time here on the podcast talking to heads of product, heads of strategy, and I'm always curious about how you prioritize in terms of what you build and what features to develop and where that information comes from to act as a springboard to decide what to build. So I'm curious in you and your team and you're thinking about innovation, like how do you prioritize? Like, are you following customer pain points? Are they asking for some of these new functionalities, or are you building stuff like they don't even know they need yet?
Yeah, I think broadly, Zach, I would categorize it as one is expanding the capabilities that we have to be able to serve customers in more ways. That's an evergreen thing. We never stop on that. I think we do a good job at just really listening to customers and our like our sales team, our frontline support team, our implementation teams are all like wonderful sources of feedback, as well as just going and meeting with our accountants and our customers directly. And so we really are very systematic about how do we listen to that signal and figure out what's most important and then add on more capabilities for that. We've been, just to give you an example, like international expansion, international payments, having companies that might have a subsidiary operating in a different country or have vendors in other countries is an area where we are continuing to innovate and add more capability, following the demands of our customers. So that's kind of bucket one. And then bucket two, especially right now, like one of the themes going on at Bill this year is reinvent and reimagine. And this is
Mhm.
where we're looking at jobs to be done that we've already quote unquote solved, but the customer expectation and the ability to solve those jobs better than we previously did is here and now. We can go back and revisit something that we thought was picture perfect, 5, 6 years ago and say, hey, there's a way to do this even better where the outcomes that were derived, when we first launched this are good, but like they could be 20% better if we take a different approach. So it's been fun because it opens up, creative thinking to just re-examine what you already have and be like, is this serving us well? And we are in the act of that right now, where we're looking at major components of the product. And we've been building Build for nearly 20 years now and saying like, is this still needed? Like if we were to do this today, with a bunch of smart people starting in a garage as a startup, like would we build it that way? Probably not. There's some
Mhm.
goodness there, but like there's probably a new slant on this. So that's kind of bucket two, I'd say, is reinventing things that we've already quote unquote solved, but making them better for today's day and age to continue to be cutting edge.
Does the need to kind of go through and rationalize, I guess, some of the legacy functionality or legacy ways you've done things, has that cycle uh, accelerated in the sense of needing to go through? Does it feels to me from where I sit like business has accelerated, but I guess from your vantage point, does it feel like you need to do that more frequently?
I think so now, because I think some of the patterns when we were building some of the things we've built were under the assumption that the operator was a person.
Mhm.
And the assumption now is that it will continue to be a person, but more as a check, more as an exception based controller who's
Mhm.
still the mastermind of how to use the software and how to run finance, but is coaching, the AI, if you will, or the worker to that is actually the one executing some of the day-to-day things. And the way that we think about it is similar to how I was talking about that change curve. Like some customers want complete control. Like they might
Mhm.
not want anything automated, and we want to offer them the ability to do that. Some people might want, complete hands off, like do as much of this as you possibly can. Just ping me when something seems off, or if it's a really big bill, I want to say yes. Like, yeah, okay. So we
Mhm.
got to be able to provide for that type of customer as well. So when you start thinking about the core product and how you might reimagine it for those two ends of the spectrum, it leads to a lot of like rethinks on stuff. And so a good amount of, we're doing that as well, in addition to adding new capabilities.
Mike, I want to go back to talk about AI again. I'm curious how you actually build AI capabilities that work in finance. As we talked before about the sizzle versus the steak here. Like, what does your development process look like, and how do you go from identifying a problem to actually putting a product in customers' hands?
Yeah, I think our technology team's really really solid, and I think that they have set us up to be in a place where we can move pretty rapidly with some of the AI development that we've done in the last 18 to 24 months. So first off, like AI, is a blanket term. There's generative AI, as you
Hmm.
know, machine learning. We've been doing machine learning and different forms of AI prior to LLMs becoming really big for a long time. So
Hmm.
like Bill, I think the one of the secret sauces of Bill was like we had OCR technology that could scan a bill, identify key fields, and we could use machine learning to say, hey, this field, I really think is the customer's, input field. I know that because of all these other, cases I've seen. And so we could map encoding of, any kind of bill, like a paper bill or PDF, whatever, relatively well to save customers time on that sort of encoding process. And so building off that foundation, we built an AI platform for development about 12 to 18 months ago that we've been building on top of that, you know, feeds off a common data lake, like allows us to, there's an orchestrator layer that allows us to use different types of LLMs for various activities. And we built at first, it was like very highly central. We had like a weekly meeting and we were building this platform, and like really any team that was building anything sort of agentic was in that meeting. We had like an AI roadmap, and it was all kind of like controlled while we were getting ourselves moving. Now it's moved into a bit more of a decentralized model where nearly everything we're building has some agentic component, and
Makes sense.
individual product teams are up to speed on how to use this AI platform. And the platform is growing in capability, and product teams are continuing to build agents on top of it. And so we check in every once in a while to kind of look at the forest view of like everything that we're doing related to AI, and to make sure it's like coming together. Is I think the next chapter for us is building more of these multi-agent orchestration things where it can like do task one and then do task two and then do task three, like based off how things in
Hmm.
the previous tasks executed. So that's something we spend a lot of time on now. But yeah, so it's kind of like we came together to centralize building and then sort of fanned out, decentralized, and now we're kind of entering another chapter and we're centralizing a bit more. So it's kind of like an accordion.
That makes
Uh,
sense. And obviously the stakes are high in finance. You can't afford to get this wrong.
totally.
So I'm curious about how do you approach training and validating AI systems when the stakes are that high? Like, can't afford the AI to hallucinate when you're dealing with people's money.
For sure. Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, we have proprietary ways of thinking through evaluations and like scoring the efficacy of AI execution, particularly when it's something that is non-deterministic, where it's like the answer is not just a clear yes, no. And just in trying to understand like, okay, how well did we execute there? We spent a lot of time on that.
Mhm.
One of our guiding principles, across the company, both, from the brand all the way to the product is trust. Is just like how, we can't, to your point, like we can't, if we lose trust with these customers on being a good steward of their finances, like we've kind of lost the battle, and I think 5 years ago, you might have looked at Bill and been like, okay, this is a company that's been around for a while. There's a lot of newer companies. And I think the legacy of the company, may have been not as helpful as it is today, where a lot of our customers are like, yes, when I trust agentic finance, I want to go with a company that's been in this for 20 years. I want to be with a company that's public. I want to be with a company that's had, is very clear on the amount of compliance and security and money moving licenses and, you know, um, versus like a Series B startup that's just been doing this for 6 months. And so, the trust aspect is big, and so we spend a lot of time on that as a development principle, and we think through the efficacy of AI.
We definitely heard alongside what you're describing, the customer expectations going up. Maybe 20 years ago, your small business customers didn't expect that much out of their software packages. Now they do, and so like keeping up with that, it definitely feels like there's been an acceleration. I'm curious in terms of rolling out new capabilities. Like, I'd love to hear how you measure things. Like, what are the KPIs that you use? Like, how do you define success?
Yeah, I think all of our agents have and like features that we're using that leverage AI have specific ones that are defined as part of the development process. There's always, it's not like the same measure, but there's always something on efficacy. Just like, is it doing what we expected it to do at an extremely high, percentile of success? And where we are on like the leniency of success there, it kind of depends on the sensitivity of the operation, but it's usually close to like not, four nines level of accuracy. Although at times, like if it's something that's not, absolutely mission critical, we might be a little bit more lenient, but usually not. So there's something around efficacy. There's something around customer satisfaction. Like, is it ultimately driving the value for the customer that we hypothesize that it would? And, if it's a individual agent that's, that might be geared towards a smaller subset of like high value customers, we might measure that through qualitative phone calls or interviews. And if it's something that's like long tail, like the receipt, encoding thing I was talking about, we can measure it a little bit more quantitatively in the sense of like, I can see how long it took you to go in and complete a transaction before you had this. And I can see how long it's taking you to complete one now. Hopefully that number is zero, versus the, minute it took previously every time you had to swipe a credit card. And so I can kind of get a sense of value that way. So the exact values range on how we do that, but it's efficacy, customer satisfaction, and increasingly, I mean, this is starting to creep up is token cost and just like cost of execution because it's I think our platform's been designed in a way that helps you know um kind of run the balance well between high quality, AI execution and, just being mindful of token costs so we don't kind of
Sure.
run away with something that's like super expensive.
That's a good segue into, I guess, my next question. So, how do you think about proving ROI in a market where I have to assume there's some AI fatigue or skepticism? Like, is there something resonating with customers?
Um, yeah, the ROI, I mean, in some cases, it's like there's some just core belief that like if it can be automated, it needs to be automated. Like if we can see a path to like saving time ultimately for customers, and we see that as like a place of high value add, we want to anchor on just like adding that value and measuring sort of return on value the first, and in the under the strong belief that that compounds into return on investment. And if I put our like CFO's hat on for a minute, in the form of better conversion, higher retention, more money moved, so on and so forth. And so as a business, I think some of the drivers that we look at really deeply are for new customers. It is like a bigger lift to sort of adopt a financial management platform, especially if you're going from like total pen and paper or like a slew of one-off tools. And so getting customers to sort of the activation in the first 6 months where they're really using it. And we're seeing, not like one bill go through, but like what we suspect is the majority of their bills and transactions, if it's our spend and expense product, go through the product. That's a key thing. So trying to drive up activation, and the inverse of that is retention in the first 6 months, just ensuring we don't lose customers before they kind of hit the aha moment or hit the tipping point. And then over time, we're looking to see more, more of their spend brought on the platform and ideally more products utilized across bill where, if they come for an accounts payable solution, because that's their burning pain point over time, hopefully we can earn the right to serve them with employee expense management as well as products like procurement and other things. So those are the main things, that we look at, but it's usually not a one-to-one on like this one thing drove that sort of, that one sort of like feature drove that lagging output of like increased retention or something, but kind of compounds over time. And we measure that on a cohort basis.
I have to imagine attribution is really hard to track when you're doing so many different things. Uh,
Yeah.
and given the scale and size of Bill, like you must have a massive amount of transaction data flowing through the platform. I'm curious how the scale and data foundation form what you build with AI.
Yeah, I mean that's a massive advantage for us. We've got 20 years of data. We've moved over $1 trillion. We've got the corpus of documents that we have, bill data. Watching money movement in B2B. We move over 1% of US GDP. I just heard a stat recently that every American interacts with a business that works with Bill.
Wow.
So that data, when you talk about who wins and who loses in AI, our belief, and we've seen it play out so far, is that that data and mining that and leveraging it correctly to train and prompt AI, with advantage, gives us the right to do things like encode bills better than anyone else, or encode receipts better than anyone else, or sniff out fraud, fat fingered bills, missed payments, mistakes better than anyone else, because we have that data corpus to leverage. And so, as I'm sure it's probably talked with other leaders about, like, providing AI with effective context is like the best thing you can do to get good results versus bad ones. And we certainly have an advantage, I think, with that context from that transaction data. Having it readily available, real time, the right set of it. Like, at the moment, we need to, execute a command or something, or a prompt is another story. Like, we're working through how to do that elegantly, but we definitely have all the pieces to do that great.
We're getting near the end of our conversation today, Mike. I want to end with a question about your approach to innovation. Like, you mentioned yourself, like there's a million companies doing a million things right now in fintech, very competitive. What do you think differentiates Bill's approach to innovation?
I think we've been, good at kind of calling it in areas where we need to do rethinks, versus incremental improvement. I think when you have, and this isn't just Bill, but any company, I've worked at Gusto, I've worked at Square, this is the third sort of larger SMB ecosystem company I've worked on. And anytime you have, 10 plus products, 20 plus products, all working at the same time and building at the same time, like on a common platform, it's pretty easy, without being deliberate, to just go incrementally improve each one. There's always one more feature, there's always one customer request, and we talked about prioritization a little bit ago. You could spend years just incrementally improving what you have, and you need to be able to have the fortitude, and I think our CEO embodies this really well, to say, hey, let's not do that everywhere. There's some places where we have, like, very clear line of sight to improvement by continuing to build on a foundation we started. That's great. There's other areas where we have to step back and say, we need to do something new here, like different, or we need to rethink something that we already did, to bring it into the modern age. And so we've got frameworks, there's like the Horizons framework from McKinsey, and there's some other frameworks that we use to help us understand our allocation of, like, big bets and material rethinks and big swings versus, smart, measured, incremental improvement. And we utilize those as we kind of look at, like, how we're allocating resources and, like, where we are on the overall spectrum of where, our R&D resources are deployed. And right now, I would say it kind of ebbs and flows. It's not always the same. Like, right now, I think we're in a bigger innovation, take bigger swings phase, because this technology unlock is incredible, and the speed at which the tech continues to evolve, continues to lead us to believe that there's big swings to take. So it's a fun time right now, because we're doing some bigger swings. That, again, kind of the accordion analogy, that tends to ebb and flow. Like, one year it might be, all right, we're doing a lot of big swings. Let's go have at it. And then maybe the next year it's like, okay, we actually have to, like, farm and settle, what we took swings on. We can't just keep, like, ripping out these big new things. We got to actually evolve them. But right now we're thinking big about some new stuff that I'm excited about. So maybe next time we talk, I'll have things to share there.
Look forward to it. Mike, thanks for joining us on the Tear Sheet podcast today.
Yeah, Zach, thanks for having me. This was really fun.